For 37 straight days, a Russian artillery unit fired at the exact same coordinates in eastern Ukraine, hitting a position that everyone on the Ukrainian side believed was empty. But on the morning of the 38th day, when Ukrainian commanders finally walked across that scorched field, what they found buried beneath the dirt did not just answer the question. It rewrote everything they thought they understood about how Russia was fighting this war. The location appears in Ukrainian field reports under a designation that has since been removed from public archives. A small clearing in the wooded zone east of Kostiantynivka in the Donetsk region. According to surviving operational logs, the field measured roughly 400 meters across, surrounded by birch trees on 3 sides and a narrow tractor road on the 4th. There was no village within 5 kilometers. There were no Ukrainian fortifications, no observation posts, no command nodes, no logistics lines. There was, by every Ukrainian assessment available at the time, absolutely nothing in that field worth a single artillery shell. And yet, beginning on the 7th of October, 2023, at 6:14 in the morning, the first Russian shell landed in the center of that empty clearing. The second came 40 seconds later. The third, 90 seconds after that. By the end of the first day, Ukrainian acoustic sensors had registered 73 impacts, all clustered within a radius of less than 30 meters from a single point on the map. The officer who first noticed the pattern was a 34-year-old artillery analyst named Roman Petrenko, working out of a forward intelligence cell roughly 20 kilometers from the impact zone. Petrenko had spent 11 years in Ukrainian military service before the full-scale invasion. He had seen unusual things. He had not seen this. In his initial report, filed at 200 hours that same evening, he wrote that the Russian fire pattern appeared, in his words, mathematically perfect, almost as if a computer was firing the same simulation over and over again. The next morning, the shelling continued. Same coordinates, same precision, same emptiness on the receiving end. By the third day, Petrenko stopped sleeping more than 4 hours a night. By the 7th day, he had requested aerial reconnaissance, ground patrols, satellite imagery, and a full electronic signal sweep of the area. Every result came back identical. There was nothing in that field. No equipment, no personnel, no thermal signature, no electronic emissions. The Russians were spending what Ukrainian estimates later placed at roughly 11,000 artillery shells on a piece of grass. The theories within the Ukrainian command structure varied widely. Some senior officers believed it was a software malfunction in a Russian targeting system, an automated battery firing at coordinates that had been incorrectly entered weeks earlier and never updated. Others suggested it was a psychological operation, a deliberate display intended to drain Ukrainian counter-battery resources by tempting them to respond. A smaller group inside Petrenko's own cell proposed something stranger. They believed the Russians were not actually firing at the field at all. They believed the field was, in their words, a relay point. Petrenko did not accept any of these explanations. He spent the next 3 weeks building a different model. He pulled every available Russian communication intercept from the period. He cross-referenced the timing of each impact against logged Russian unit activity in adjacent sectors. He requested historical satellite imagery from before the war, going back to 2017. And on the morning of the 35th day of the bombardment, he found something that changed his entire analysis. On the other side of the line, the Russian artillery crew assigned to that fire mission had their own questions, though they were in no position to ask them out loud. According to fragments of intercepted communications that surfaced in later analysis, the gunners had been told only that the coordinates were a priority sustained fire task, and that no deviation from the firing schedule was to be tolerated. One young Russian sergeant reportedly asked his battery commander, on the 11th day of the operation, why they were continuing to fire at what looked, from every drone image they had been shown, like an empty field. The commander, whose name has not appeared in any open source material, is said to have replied that the orders came from a level high enough that the question itself was the dangerous part. The crew kept firing. The shells kept landing. Both sides, in their own way, were watching the same patch of ground without understanding what it actually was. The field had not always been a field. According to Soviet-era survey records that had been digitized and transferred to Ukrainian archives in 2019, The clearing had once been the surface marker for an underground communications relay. Built in 1986 as part of a regional civil defense network, the relay had been decommissioned in 1994. The above-ground equipment had been removed. The underground vault, according to the records, had been sealed and forgotten. Petrenko did not present his theory immediately. He waited 2 more days, watching the impacts continue. On the 37th day, the Russian shelling stopped at 4:11 in the afternoon, exactly as it had every previous day. That evening, Petrenko walked into the office of his commanding officer with a single folder containing 18 pages of analysis. He requested permission to send a small ground team to the field at first light. The team arrived at the edge of the clearing at 6:02 in the morning on the 38th day. There were 4 soldiers, a combat engineer, and Petrenko himself. The field was unrecognizable. Years of grass had been replaced by a churned landscape of overlapping craters. The smell of burned earth was still in the air. They walked carefully, marking unexploded ordnance as they moved. When they reached the precise center coordinate that had been the focus of every single Russian shell, they found something that none of them had expected. The repeated impacts had cracked open the surface above the old Soviet vault. Through a fractured concrete slab, partially exposed by the bombardment itself, they could see down into a chamber that had been sealed for nearly 30 years. What was inside the chamber became the subject of a classified Ukrainian assessment that has never been publicly released in full. According to fragments of that assessment, which later surfaced in regional security publications, the vault contained intact Soviet-era communications equipment, sealed archives, and what investigators described as documentation relating to a network of similar sites across the eastern Ukrainian territory. The Russians, it appeared, had not been firing at an empty field. They had been firing at the lid of a vault that they wanted opened, but could not be seen opening themselves. 37 days of artillery fire had served as a slow, deniable, and utterly unconventional method of breaching a target that no infantry unit could have approached without being detected. When Petrenko's report reached higher command in Kiev, it reportedly took less than 6 hours for an order to come back. The vault was to be sealed again, this time by Ukrainian engineers, and the contents were to be removed under conditions that remain undisclosed. By the morning of the 40th day, the field had been quietly fenced off. The bombardment never resumed. What the Russians had been hoping to retrieve from that chamber, and what the Ukrainians ultimately took from it instead, has never been confirmed by either side. Both governments have declined repeated requests for comment. The few analysts who have publicly examined the surviving operational fragments suggest that the chamber may have held documents linking historical Soviet communication networks to infrastructure still in use across the wider region. Whether that interpretation is correct, no one outside a small classified circle currently knows. What is known as this? For 37 straight days, 2 armies stared at the same patch of dirt. One side was trying to open something. The other side was trying to understand why anyone would bother. And on a quiet morning in late autumn, when the firing finally stopped, the answer turned out to be older, stranger, and quieter than anyone had imagined. Some questions, in this war as in every war before it, are answered only when both sides finally stop firing long enough to look at what was actually there the entire time. The story of the field outside Kostiantynivka rarely appears in summaries of the war. There are no dramatic photographs of it, no widely circulated footage. The men who walked across it that morning have given no public interviews. Roman Petrenko, according to a brief mention in a Ukrainian defense periodical, was reassigned to a different intelligence section in early 2024, and his name has not appeared in reporting since. Within analytical circles, the case is still studied today as an example of how forgotten infrastructure can quietly become a contested battlefield without ever being touched. If this analysis made you reconsider what an artillery strike can actually mean, what a target can actually be, and how much of modern warfare unfolds beneath the surface of what we are shown, then this channel is the place for you. Every week, we examine operations, signals, and quiet decisions that shape conflicts long before the headlines catch up. Some stories favor one side, some favor the other, many favor no one at all. And that is exactly the point. Subscribe so you do not miss the next breakdown, turn on notifications, and leave a comment with the detail you noticed that no one else mentioned.